Coming up.
Down and dirty. What can I, without the Bible, prove? And man, is it so stacked for Christianity. It is like so unbelievably stacked. Like, and I didn't need it to be stacked. I wanted it to be. But if it wasn't, it wasn't. And I'm not going to lie to myself because apparently it's not how my brain works. I can't just take no for an answer or, well, maybe. I have to see it. And after all these months of studying and years, I mean, it's been quite a while now, I'm like, it's all so much more real to me that it's like almost like scary how real it is now. And that's why I'm so on fire for it, because it's like I put it to the test and man, it stood well beyond where I thought.
All right, well, welcome back to On the Table. For this episode, we are going to put Michael on the table. Just not literally.
I don't think I can lift him.
But he is absolutely, literally the topic of the episode. And just thought it'd be kind of cool to just introduce ourselves. So we're going to start with Michael. And you are on the table.
You have the floor.
Or you have the table.
Hello, I'm
Tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, Michael Lepard, not leopard like everyone calls me, and I have to correct them. What do you guys want to know about me?
Yeah, I'm going to interject right now and just say we're going to interrupt a lot because this is a forum where we're all talking about things. So, if we expect a monologue, it's not going to be that way. No, I'm just kidding. We'll give a chance for people to talk, but it's a neat opportunity for us to push in a little bit. We all know each other pretty well. You don't know us very well listening to this, probably, maybe, but we'll just make it normal. So I would say, just start at the beginning. Wherever you want, man. Tell us how did you get here? It doesn't have to be a chronological life story, but where are you at? Where are you at right now, and what's different about where you were in other times of your life? I don't know.
North Carolina. Prior, I was in Utah. Going back, my parents got divorced when I was, 5 or something like that. And my mother started dating my soon-to-be stepfather, who was a Christian, and I feel like my parents said they were like kind of Christian, like a little bit, but it didn't really. I don't remember anything. I mean, I was pretty young, but I don't think really they were like practicing anything at all, like even prayers. Maybe it didn't seem like. But my stepfather kind of brought the Christian faith into our house. He was a Baptist. He was pretty abusive. I won't go into too many details, but he was pretty abusive. I had a lot of fear from him, but God was sort of always. It seemed like, God's behind me, and we got to go to church, and we got to be the best family and put the best face on, and he's the loudest singer in the church. We sat in the back row, and yet you could hear him, no matter where you're at. My stepdad, that is. Yeah. So that's how God was introduced to my life. It wasn't the greatest, but.
And was it just you in the house with them, or?
No, it was my mom, my stepdad, and my 2 brothers and my sister and I.
Okay.
So there's quite a few of us.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's where I came to know God, and I definitely think that I had a relationship with Him. It wasn't just some facade. I believed that Jesus was real and God was real, and I had sort of rehearsed the saving prayer that you're told, like, that's what you do. You got to do that. Yeah. So I was like, okay, I did it. But then as I got older, I haven't talked about this in a long time. At one point I was at a summer camp, and it had hit me that I really was just sort of just doing what I was like told to do, kind of like, you got to go to church, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I didn't, I was there for my friends and stuff. I didn't really think much about God at a young age. It's hard to comprehend that concept.
Yeah.
So at about 10, I was at a church camp, and I remember talking to my counselor. I was like, hey, I'm not sure if I'm saved because I don't know what that really means. I've always been told I was, but can you tell me, really what that means? And he was like, oh, it means accepting And, if you accept that, then you're good. And I was like, well, can you help me accept that so I can comprehend? And he prayed with me and talked with me. Super nice guy. I wished I remembered his name. That's sort of where I was going into my teenage years. And then as I became a teenager, so my mom and my stepdad, who had custody of me almost fully, it was like 5 to 6 days a week, they moved and gave me to my biological dad.
Okay.
Who I wanted to live with.
Yeah.
Growing up.
So this was like early teenager. Is that what you're saying?
I think 12.
Yeah.
I think I was about 12 years old. Like I was saying, I don't think, I'm not, my dad might have been saved, I'm not sure, but that just wasn't a part of our household. Like God wasn't really involved in anything. So once I moved in with him, I started getting into the typical teenage stuff. I got into, smoking and drinking. I was, smoking weed at like 12. I was smoking cigarettes at 12, and getting hardcore drunk also at 12.
Oh.
But I didn't really have like a ton of supervision, and I don't blame my dad for that because he was also going through a lot of stuff with his current marriage. And I pushed everyone away. I was like, I'm with my friends. That's who I'm going to be doing stuff with. I'm going to go off and party.
And were you the only child of the 3 or 4 you said that were with the other two? Like just you? It was just you and your dad?
Yeah,
mostly?
yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay. So my dad is my biological father, but not my brothers and sisters. They have a different dad. So
gotcha.
The plot thickens.
Sorry to interrupt, but
no, you're good. Thank you.
Trying to understand how many went with you.
Yeah,
so,
no, definitely.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
So now, do you think you guys got to ask questions too? It's not just me interviewing them, but I'm going to ask my question anyway. Mm-hmm. Just like do you think that the experimentation of things like drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff was just because you could and because you were at the age where that's like, oh wow, like if I can do this, I'm going to do it? Or were you? I know it's a pretty deep question to jump into already, or were you maybe? You may not know the answer to this, or were you trying to drown out something? And was there? Because I know a lot of adults do that for that reason, but I also know that a 12-year-old's probably way more mature than we give him credit for. So, was that? Do you think it was some of both, or I don't know? I don't want to put words in your mouth. What do you think? Why were you pushing in on that stuff and drowning out the world, or were you just experimenting and?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a good question. I don't know. I didn't think a lot about it. I was like I was saying, I was abused a lot as a kid, physically, nothing sexual or anything like that. Just to make it clear, I never think God had to deal with that. But definitely like hardcore beatings, like belts and hands. Like my dad was like gonna bring him to court. It was really bad. Like I got the crap kicked out of me often. And I think part of it was that probably knowing just how people work and think. But also, I don't know. I was going to be a teenager. I was hanging out with, friends that were not, that were older. I was hanging out with a guy that was 18, who was also a drug dealer.
Oh, wow.
So I was definitely like involved in, people in my life that probably weren't great influences. But on the other hand, I know teenagers, unfortunately, are going to do stuff that they want to do, and I was very hard-headed. I still am, but I've always been very rebellious. So I think that, that just fed into it. So, yeah, that was an interesting part of my life. Thankfully, I didn't die. I did all sorts of crazy things that were super dangerous. At that point, I didn't really, I don't know. I would say that I believed, but I don't think I really thought about God for years. I think there was one point I was actually hanging out with me and our audio engineer's friend Dominic, and we were playing, I think it was Super Smash Brothers, and I feel like I started praying. I was almost like getting anxious or something. I just remember thinking, and I was like I should pray. And I remember it kind of hit me. I was like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I want to do that? It was almost like it was like calling me to do it. And I was like, okay, God, like I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm hello, kind of type of thing. Like, okay. And then I kind of just went through the next several years of my life till 16, just, again, not really, I never opened a Bible. I probably prayed maybe 2 or 3 times over the course of those several years. Yeah. And I wasn't going to church or anything like that. Then I met my first wife, Sarah, and while we were dating, she was 14, I was 16. We started dating, and we did all the stuff that teenagers do. We were going, I was still drinking and doing drugs, and we had lots of bad influences around us.
Can you go into detail on some of the? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah, right. No,
Use your imagination.
I'm sure your wife here would like to hear even more detail.
we drew kittens, little beautiful kittens. That were super fun.
That's what I figured. That's why I wanted to know.
Art. It's about art.
What color did you color them?
Black.
I bet you guys did do stuff like that.
I mean, I saw her drawing stuff all the time. She always doodling and stuff.
I have notes from her for like years worth of notes. She'd sit in class and write to me. And then after class, she'd be like, here you go. And then I'd go home and read them. I have all of them. I even have a book that her grandmother wrote about her when she was like 2. I have the book still that the grandmother wrote with all the notes and pictures and stuff in it.
And she was in our youth group. Sweet. I know she doodled a lot. She was always doing something on a piece of paper, no matter what.
Yeah, so, definitely. Yeah.
Very artsy person.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Was she fartsy too?
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Not too much. Not as much as me.
All right, sorry. So you met Sarah.
Yeah, so I met Sarah, and we were dealing with all the drama that comes with being a teenager and love. And at some point, I was sort of just fed up with everything that was going on. I was also, worried that some things might have been coming up. I'm not going to go into details on them. That I was just stressed about. There were some events in my life that I was really stressed about. And I, for some reason, I don't talk to my mom too much. I do love her. I called my mom, and I was like, Mom, can you tell me, like, how to pray? And she's like, what? And I was like, can you tell me what, like, I have never really, like, done this before, like, and meant it, but I feel like I need to. For some weird reason. Again, this is me, like, in, like, a really hardcore part of my life, but I kept getting this, like, draw, and I was like, I need to talk to someone. I didn't know anyone that was really Christian, so I called my mom. And she was like, oh, like, she explained it to me. It's really simple. There's not a lot to it. It's like talking to a friend. And it's like a little weird to me. Like when you've never really prayed a lot, you're sort of like, hey, Mr. Invisible. So I was like, all right, we'll give this a shot. So I started praying. And then I don't know why or how it happened. God somehow just sort of like, swiped me up. And I was like, I need to fix some things in my life that I'm doing that are stressing me out constantly. And I'm not here judging drinking. I like to drink as well. I'm not judging people smoking or weed. I don't care what you're doing. That's not what we're here for. At that time in my life, at 16, those weren't good things for me to be doing. They weren't benefiting me. They were hurting me a lot. And I started praying, and those things just sort of went away. I didn't have really an urge for them anymore. And I then brought up to Sarah, even though we were both doing all the stuff together, I was like, this is going to sound crazy, but I'm Christian. And she's like, oh, perfect. Me too. And I was like, you are? You don't act Christian. And she's like, oh yeah, my whole family, we're all Christian. And I was like, oh, great. And she's like, okay, sure, let's go to church together. I was like, all right, we'll go to church together. Cool, sweet. And that's when we started Googling churches, and we found Phil and Laurel's church, and I guess Taylor's too, Foot of the Cross in Ritos, New Mexico.
Yeah.
I was at 17, I think. 16 or 17.
So reflections of that here, so push around the table. So I remember that day. We probably all do, like the first day they came in.
Oh yeah, they had just been to the little
Allsup's
or something. Yeah, Allsup's, I guess. Got their little whatever snacks and
energy
drink
probably.
Yeah, and they came in dressed goth. Came in the back, sat in the back row, and that, I mean, I just remember that day seeing you guys there, and just, I don't know, I had a heart for you guys. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we just like completely all fell in love with you guys. I don't know, it was just like absolute love at first visit or something. I mean, it really was. Like I remember, like the first time you were there, we just like hung out with you all. Yeah, remember that? Like way past when everybody left. Ate some of your snacks. Because you guys didn't just come with one thing. So, like you would come with like 12 packages of snacks.
Yeah.
And you smelled like that nasty grease from there. So you must have been eating the burritos or something prior to that. Yeah. So,
Yeah, we lived in Allsops.
yeah, that's what I figured. So, because you can't get that smell off you. I mean, smoke's one thing. Allsops is a whole new level. Go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, I remember just being excited that there was more kids around my age. Actually, at first, I didn't realize that you guys were close to my age. I thought you were way older than me. I almost thought you were maybe married or something. But that's just probably, I don't know, me being a bad judge of age. But and also I think I just always thought people were like more mature than me or something. But I was super shy and was too nervous to go and like introduce myself by myself. So I think a friend of mine at the time went with me. We like went and talked to you guys and invited you guys to youth group and all that. But it was a really small town, and like having anybody else that you could know that's near your age was like exciting. So I think I was really excited to have more people in the church that were, potential new friends. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but I mean, that's sort of where it all started. Again, I guess my new awakening. But, and our audio video engineer, Derek, can attest to this, I overshot.
Yeah?
I overshot.
Tell us about this.
Like I was saying, and I'm not trying to judge this denomination. I grew up Baptist by an abusive stepfather who was a Marine and, hardcore Republican. It was a very stereotypical seeming household with a lot of abuse. So I thought that for me to be Christian, I needed to stop sinning. Yeah. I needed to stop doing everything sinful. I had to stop cussing. I had to get rid of any movies that had any sort of sexual content or it sort of led to it. Anything that had violence was evil. And I'm not saying for people that don't want to watch that stuff that's wrong, but for me at the time, I was doing it out of a fear of God hating me. Yeah. More than it's like God's not going to save
desire.
me.
It was more of a,
yeah.
So you had to stop watching Hello Kitty because she like beats people with that. Yeah.
It's pretty violent.
Yeah. It's pretty. Yeah.
I still don't watch that. I'm scared. But yeah, I mean, so I sort of overshot. I mean, you could talk to him about it. Like I didn't want anyone saying anything like even jokingly about my wife that was like slightly like a sexual joke. Obviously not too intense, but just even like a slight joke like, oh, she's pretty. I'd be like, what do you mean she's pretty? What's in your evil mind? I overshot it. I was like super, like I was throwing out movies and music. I was like, I got to be clean. However, I did all that. And as I started to get older, and thankfully now I have medication that helps me. I think a lot of that had to do with me not understanding grace, mixed with a mental disorder that I believe I have because of the abuse that I was dealt with. Oh. Some of it might be hereditary because I know some other people in my family also have some of those mental things that are stressful, with depression and stuff like that. But I think, there might have also came from the abuse as well. Yeah. It's hard to tell.
Is some of that overshot you're talking about, like you just went that far? Because I remember parts of talking to you at those times, and I think some of it wasn't just what you did, but also you started pushing into what you thought. Yeah. And thought, if I even think something or dream something, that I'm somehow sinning, right? I mean, it was pretty intense.
It's like legalism on steroids.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I don't know why that happened. Yeah. I mean, some of that happened slightly after we got married. I mean, it was sort of like, to wind back just for a moment, my first wife, Sarah, died, if anyone doesn't know. She died, but that's sort of like the end of that chapter. And then, a lot of great things came out of that, a lot of pain, but I believe that she's with God. And if she was pregnant, because she died due to an ectopic pregnancy surgery, I believe I'll see them again. So I have a lot of hope there. But I met Taylor, who was also Sarah's friend, and we have a couple of kids now. But yes, when we got married and we had moved, I I don't know what happened. It was like I always had that voice in the back of my head that was beating me up my entire life. Like, you're nothing, you're nothing. Like, that's how I was raised. Like everything I did, even if I didn't do something, was like punishable by beating. Like, my dad bought me a box of chocolate once when I was 10, and my stepdad found it in my backpack, and he beat me and took it and was like, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I was like, "Well, my dad bought it for me." And he's like, "Go to your room," and he beat me and took it all and ate it all. Yeah, it was insane. Like, it was really bad, and I think he sort of like implanted this thought in my head that I'm just bad.
Bad no matter what.
No matter what I did, because I wasn't even doing stuff. I think that's probably what led me as a teenager going to actually do stuff. Like, why not do it?
I am that person.
I'm already
so.
garbage. I might as well go off and drink and do drugs because at least it gives me something to feel with. Yeah, it gives me something to feel. So yeah, I mean, after we got married, I mean, I was a wreck for like a year and a half, maybe almost 2, where it was like everything that you could possibly think someone would, and anything bad about anybody was like, I would just think strangers on the street would be like, "Oh, you're disgusting." I would just think it. I'd play it over in my head, just like, I don't want to say voices. That sounds a little goofy, but it is. It's like your inner monologue, sort of just like, "Oh, like, you're nothing. I bet these people think that of you. Oh, she got hurt by this. I bet you're capable of doing that. I bet you've seen the violence on the TV. I bet you could do that." And I'm like, well, of course I could. I don't want to, but that's not how my brain processed it. My brain was, if you were capable of hurting someone,
It's like
you
you're
are
already guilty
hurting
of it.
them.
You're already guilty of it.
Yeah, and that just wrecked me. Like, I was like, I couldn't wrap my head around this idea that I'm not just evil incarnate almost. And Taylor got the worst of it. I mean, hours. Every day for like a year and a half, I just like be crying or venting. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm freaking out. Like, I feel like I'm going insane. Like, I don't know what to do.
So if you meet Taylor and you realize that, it explains why she's so weird.
Yeah.
No, that's your fault. That goes way back.
She was already ready to handle that kind of,
Yeah.
because she had to sit there and listen to me for her entire life before then.
You poor thing.
No, yeah, it was definitely a very stressful time though, because it was like you were either not talking and quiet, and I knew something was wrong, like something was bothering you, like you were stuck in your head, because you would just be silent and not doing any. Sometimes you just pace
For hours.
for a long time, and it was just like I didn't know how to help you sometimes, and sometimes it felt like, I was trying to just say the same thing to you over and over again, and it wasn't helping,
Yeah.
So
It was really bad, and I struggled. Like, I was praying to God, but I wasn't. I don't know. I still just didn't have a connection with Him really. I feel like it was like I was praying, but I sort of was just crying out for help and needing something, but I was like almost like not willing to accept anything other than like some crazy miracle of like, boom, I'm done. Like, it was like I didn't want to accept what people were saying to help, which I think God uses things. Sometimes it's a miracle.
Sure.
For sure. Sometimes it's purely just you pray for someone and boom, immediately. And you're like, wow, what a coincidence. But no, and then sometimes it is someone being like, hey, I was thinking of you last night. Can we talk?
Yeah.
That, I think, is where God works through people. And
there might be 1,000 of those that takes.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe just a little bit of watering on one, some seeds over here. And
yeah.
I'm sorry I interrupted your flow there,
No, you're
but
good.
it does. One of the main things that strikes me about your testimony of your life is that it's such a real description of most people I've met and myself. It's not that my life was just like yours, but my journey with God wasn't. I think I don't know if I don't just like you. I don't want to knock people, because I think there are probably people that live up to the sort of stereotypical testimony that, oh, I did all these wrong things, and then someone took me to a meeting and we prayed and my life was better for then on out. Like, I suppose those people exist. I've never met a single one. I've heard them talk in church, so maybe that I don't want to accuse them of lying. But I think the problem with hearing that over and over again in people's testimonies is if that isn't your experience, and it isn't most of the people I know, it's not their experience, then it kind of can leave you feeling like, well, a little bit like you were saying, like, when am I going to get that miracle that changes me completely for all time, and I never actually have a temptation or do anything wrong again? And I think that's the beauty of hearing you say this, because we can jump back and forth in this. It doesn't have to be chronological, but I'm just going to say, looking across the table here, I see a man that's just on fire for God. He's on fire for the word. He's on fire for helping people and passionate about people. You're just such a people lover, and you love the underdog, and that's like Jesus's heart. And you love Jesus now, and you're going to like Chosen movies and just like going crazy over it, and you're digging into the word like I've never seen you before. That's where you're at right now. And it's just going to go from there up. I mean, it's just, and I just think, but it was this slow progression and back and forth, and you went this way and you went that way, and it wasn't just some formulaic thing.
Yeah, definitely.
And we'll get into more of what it was, but I just, to me, it's fascinating to just think, that's real life sometimes. And it's not just, I hope that's helpful for people to hear your testimony, that just hang out, stick it out. If you got something in you and you cry out to God, it doesn't feel quite right, but you cry out to God the next day, just know that that's something in you that God's pulling on, and he's pulling, and you're pulling, and you're going to connect. Just walk it out.
Sure.
So you're living testimony to the fact that you've been through so much, but nowhere along that line was God willing to let that relationship die, and neither were you. And I think that's to me, that's just really heartening. So anyway,
well, that's nice to hear. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely how it felt, like not having him and then having him, and then not caring about him and then having him, and then being scared of him, and then going through the motions, which we all do. It happens. Sometimes life just hits you like a brick, and that's what you're thinking about. But yeah, so once I got out of that phase, then another phase hit, and I hated this phase at first. But now I absolutely love it. And I'm not encouraging everyone to do this, because if you don't need it, don't do it.
It's your own journey, so yeah.
My thing. Taylor and I had seen some things online that started to make us question things. Our faith. And that's a scary thing. That's probably the scariest thing I can think of. I honestly can't think of much else. I mean, obviously, like something happening to my kids are right up there, and the worst things I could possibly imagine. But this is, I mean, that's big. I'd hate to find out that everything I believed was a lie, or that the miracles I thought happened were somehow just 1 in a trillion chance coincidences that kept happening, but that's all they were. Like there's just nothing. It's just all creationism and naturalism and evolution and all those fancy scientific keywords. So we dug in. I told her, I was like, I need to do this. Like I can't not do it now that I'm thinking about it, because if I probably because of my anxiety, but I was like, if I don't do it, then I'm always gonna think, well, what if you're brainwashed?
Yeah.
Your stepdad put this in you by beating you. You had God, you left him, you came back, you kind of went through the motions, and now look where you're at. Now you're questioning if he exists. You're not really Christian. You're not, like, what if? So I started to deconstruct, I think is the word that people say nowadays. It's like the main keyword here. I started deconstructing, and I know you did it a bit too. Both of us at that time were really digging into it and trying to figure out, like, okay, like, is he this weird replication of some pagan thing that happened with the sun, and is he some weird thing with this, or blah 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 blah. And then we studied, and we talked to Phil and Laurel a little bit about it. But that moment in our life, I sort of just got to this point where I was like, okay, I'm not going to lose my faith, but I still have a lot of questions, and I'm teetering. And I teetered for a while, and I think that's sort of what jump-started my phase where I'm at now, which is like studying, because I needed to know truth. And I started telling Taylor, and I've been saying this for quite a while now, I'm like, if God is truth, then why am I afraid to study anything?
Yeah.
He should always be there. If he's not truth, then I'm not going to find him when I'm studying.
And why would you want to believe in that?
Exactly.
Just for the sake of believing in nothing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I've always hated this concept where people are like, oh, Christians believe in God because they're afraid of death. I've never understood that. Why would I be afraid of death? If death is nothing, then I'm going to live it up now.
Boom.
Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
If there's nothing, and I try to still live that way with Christ, but it's the same difference. There is a God in the afterlife. This time's short. I'm going to live now. There's no God. This is it. And then we're just dead molecules that disappear, and we're all go back to nothingness. well, I better live it up now. So I've never understood that concept of, oh, you're just afraid of death. No, if there's nothing, fine. Okay, whatever. But if there is something, that means there's a truth out there that's beyond just blackness and nothingness.
Yeah.
So that's where my mind went. I'm going to deconstruct everything. I'm going to deconstruct who Jesus was. I'm going to deconstruct who God is. I'm going to deconstruct if the Bible is even real. I'm going to start studying Islam. I'm going to start studying Hinduism. I'm going to start studying Eastern New Age religions. I'm going to start studying all of these because if I give them the same test that I give the Bible for Christ, they are either wrong or they're right and I'm wrong. Mm-hmm. So let's put everyone to the test. It sort of reminds me of the whole Lee Strobel case for Christ thing. That's sort of what I did. Yeah. And I was like, okay, what are some things? And I'm like, okay, I can't just read their scriptures. I just can't. Because if I read the Bible, God might talk to my heart, right? Like I know the word living and I believe he can do that, but I've always sort of struggled reading the Bible a bit. It's hard for me. Like I still sometimes struggle it. I get bored or I just don't understand. I'm like, gosh, I feel like an idiot. It's gotten better as I've continued to do it, but I knew there's no way I was going to study like the Quran and be like, there's God. Now don't get me wrong, and I'm not going to bash any religion because I respect the people that are in them. There are little bits and bobs of truth spread throughout things. Sure, people are people, right? There are things. There's great morals in New Age religions, and the Buddha had great teachings. But I don't believe in the afterlife parts that they had to talk about, and that's where my God, whoever it is, I have to find that. Yeah. So I just did it. I started studying all the prophecies that all of Hinduism had, and I started being like, okay, when were the records of them? When did the date happen? I had a spreadsheet, hundreds. I mean, like this was prophesized on 672 AD. It came true in 680 AD. Well, when was it written about? Or when's the earliest copy? Well, 1200 AD. Well, then that doesn't work for me. And the Bible's full of that too. We just don't have don't have scripture from 3000 AD. We just don't. No, I believe because of my faith that they are from then, but if I was a non-believer, that would be hard for me to wrap my head around. That's why I believe, right? So I was like, no, sift through all of that. Down and dirty. What can I, without the Bible, prove? And man, is it so stacked for Christianity. It is like so unbelievably stacked. Like, and I didn't need it to be stacked. I wanted it to be. But if it wasn't, it wasn't. And I'm not going to lie to myself because apparently it's not how my brain works. I can't just take no for an answer or, well, maybe. I have to see it. And after all these months of studying and years, I mean, it's been quite a while now, I'm like, it's all so much more real to me that it's like almost like scary how real it is now. And that's why I'm so on fire for it, because it's like I put it to the test and man, it stood well beyond where I thought it was going to be standing.
That's cool.
So.
Yeah, no, and you're right too. Like there's, just for preservation's sake, it's not possible that we would have documents of anybody's writings. I mean, Homer's writings were the first examples were like 1,000 years after he wrote them or something like that. But we do live in an incredible time if you're looking for documentary evidence like Michael's found, is because especially in the last 50 years since the Dead Sea Scrolls, because people don't understand. They go, oh, okay, I kind of get it. Some kid in the desert threw a rock and hit some stuff, and there were some old scriptures. But you got to dig in a little further and find out why that's so significant. Why it's so significant is you had all of this textual criticism trying to knock the fact that maybe the Bible was made up and it was really written in 300 AD and all this other stuff. And then they find these scrolls that were written prior to that, like going all the way back to the times of Christ and before. But on top of that, I don't know, this was right out in the open, and I don't know why people it just takes a while for people to understand things. But the Septuagint, too, is also a very powerful understanding of documentary evidence for the Bible, because it was basically the Greek translation of the Old Testament, which was written long before most of the fragments we have of the Old Testament. So most of those are in the 200-300 AD range. But the Septuagint was out in distribution. If you think about the disciples, they were walking around with the Septuagint Bible. So anyway, those two things are pretty powerful, along with all the other stuff you probably studied. But we live in a pretty exciting time for you to be able to go, well, I don't know, everything was just written a long time ago. No, you can't say that anymore. There's just rock solid truth. And then you look at archaeology and all other stuff. I you know me, I'm not one to say, you've got to prove God in order to believe him. I think it's the other way around. Believe God and he'll be real to you, because he doesn't have, He's not waiting around for you going, well, I have to justify myself to you. He's looking for people who want to seek him, right? Yeah. So, but when you do seek him, boy, it just opens up and there is stuff. But if you do want evidence, there's so much. And the Bible itself is so full of amazing things. It's not just the prophecies, it's the way it was written and its form, and it's got this crazy like computer form to it that has Bible codes in it, and it's got all this stuff that man could have never done, kind of like the Shroud has stuff, Shroud of Turin basically has stuff that just is impossible to create even with modern technologies and stuff. So the Bible's even more so that way. But it's getting way off the topic, but it's always exciting because that's the stuff you're into. But that's cool. And I think you're just beginning. We were kidding earlier today talking about it. It's like, I remember I used to try to do a Bible study with you or something like that, and it was just kind of cold to you, and I'm not knocking you for that. I'm just being honest. And I think it takes for you, and everybody's different, but for Michael, it was kind of like what he's saying. It was like, I don't know if I believe this. So then it's like you tear into it. But I'm noticing in one of the side effects that's pretty cool about your journey over the last 4 or 5 years is that you're learning the word like you never did before,
Yeah.
And
I
that's
still
pretty
have
cool.
questions.
Who doesn't?
I have all sorts of questions.
Who doesn't?
There's all sorts of things I read in the Old Testament. I'm like, really? Did that really happen?
Yeah.
Is that figurative? Are you sure? But I've come to realize and teach myself it's okay to have those questions. And if I want to study them more, I'll study them more. Mm-hmm. If I want to just leave them be so I can focus on something more important, then I'll do that. And that's what I feel like God's always constantly giving me these little fun things to study.
God asked us to do that. Jesus himself said, ask, seek, knock. He was saying, be inquisitive, push in, try to find the answers to these things, God in Isaiah chapter 1 says, come, let us reason together. When you look at that word reason, it's actually saying, use your brain and intellect in order to let's think together, let's think deeply. So, the Bible's, that's just a couple. There's a ton of examples of that where God's actually making it that plea. It's not just it's okay to be intellectual. It's not just okay to seek in. It's like God's desire for you to seek him,
He's going to meet you right there. Meet you in that, and I think he did with you.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think so too. But it's because I don't know if the right word would be persevered. It's like I just kept fighting because I want truth. What else is there? Like, great, I have my family, I got my friends, but the purpose of life. And I know I sound like some crazy guy probably. It's the biggest thing in the world. There's nothing bigger in this world to study. I could get into a car crash tonight and die. And I'm really just gonna die, just being like, oh well, I'll see what happens when I die, or I'll be nothing, And I'm not trying to bash atheists or something like that. I'm just saying, study. Really, open your mind. As a Christian, I open my mind to other religions and atheism. I studied naturalism. I studied evolution a bit. Open your mind about it and find truth. I believe if you really do that, sure, you're gonna have questions. Sure, you might. There's a contradiction or two in there. I don't understand that. Study it.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Some of the best stuff comes from those
question God. I don't think God's afraid of us questioning. I think if anything, he's more disappointed when we don't try.
I agree with you.
We don't even try to do anything. To me, that's
you're not engaged. You're not involved, right?
Yeah.
It's just
exactly.
No, I think that's right. I think he'd rather us question and push in and fail.
Yeah.
Come to the wrong conclusions, and like he said to the church of Laodicea, I'd rather you be. He doesn't say hot for me. And that's it. He's like, that doesn't sound right.
Hot for teacher.
Yeah. Hot or cold, he says. So he's like, it's like, I'd rather you be on the extremes than it's just sort of just going through life. And I go to church and I do my thing and that kind of stuff. It's like, I just don't, I love that. And I think there's somehow in your testimony, I think you've kind of said it, but I just want to say it to anybody listening. I think somehow we can get the idea going to church and being a Christian that we're really kind of not supposed to like this is like this stuff that's said from the pulpit, this stuff that's said in the small group or the teaching, or that person was a teacher, so they taught me. I would just want to really assure you folks, Jesus put a stop to that, and you need to stop, because what he said is there's only one teacher, and it's me. And he was speaking of himself. Anybody's able to push in. Anybody's able to have the knowledge that God wants them to have. Anybody's able to understand the things that God wants them to understand. It's not that church is bad. It's not the small groups or Bible study. I'm not trying to knock that at all. But
God
hierarchies,
uses those things for sure to help people learn some stuff. But I agree with you. It's like you need to also apply your own study, your own efforts into like getting to know God and getting closer to Him, working on your relationship with Him yourself, because otherwise it's not personal, and you're not going to, and somebody could be teaching you something that's not correct. It's just what they think is true. It doesn't mean it's for sure truth.
That's
So,
right.
yeah.
I had a question for a pastor one time, a long time ago, and his answer was, "Don't touch the anointed." That's what he said to me. Instead of, "Oh, wow, I'm glad you have a question. Let's talk about it," or "What do you think about it?" "Don't you question or touch the anointed," was his answer. I'm like, oh my gosh, and I think that's probably what he told a lot of people. And like a lot of churches are set up that way. I know it sounds a lot of times like I'm bashing church, but I want church to be what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a gathering of Jesus people to share their lives and their testimonies and bread and worship and teaching and stuff like that, not some kind of weird thing to kind of shave us all of the beauty off of us and make us look and act and talk and vote the same. That's not what church was supposed to be,
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a place to inspire us to do exactly what Michael's saying, to push deeper with the Lord. And when you look at Jesus' church tromping around in Israel, that's what they were doing. What were those guys doing? They weren't just going like, okay, Jesus said to do this, so I'm going to do this. They're like, hey, Jesus, can we be first in the kingdom of God? And they had to learn. And they're like, hey, go out and do this. And they're like, okay, it was kind of good and kind of bad. And these guys, oh, look, there's a demon. We can cast him out. We can't cast him out. What are we doing wrong? Well,
Let's have lightning come down from the sky and knock him out.
I mean, it was real stuff, 1 minute, Jesus is telling Peter, man, you are awesome, Peter. You're like the rock, And then the next minute, he's like, get behind me, Satan. Actually, in the same chapter.
Poor Peter.
Yeah. But that's real life.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a put down. I think it was just God's just really honest with us, but He doesn't abandon us. So that's the kind of friend you want. Someone that's super honest with you, but you don't have to worry that, if I offend them or piss them off, then they're gone.
Yeah.
It's more like if I piss them off, they're going to say, hey, you pissed me off. Maybe that's a weird translation, but
Makes sense.
good stuff, man.
Cool.
Any other questions?
I'd say to close it off here, just reflections. Like I did some with Michael. Why don't you guys just reflect? Just anything. I think it's neat to call things out to people. It's one of my big buttons that I like to push in the church is that we should call out things in one another. And it doesn't always have to be some amazing thing. It can be. Sometimes it's just some fun experience or something. Because I think we go through life. Michael said it himself in his testimony that he was questioning a lot of times. Am I doing it right? Am I the right person? Am I this? Am I that? I think we're all a little unsure of ourselves. Maybe that's a way understatement. I think we're all very unsure of ourselves a lot of the time. I know I am.
Yeah.
I question myself all the time. Her book mentions that negative self-talk, that you brought up, that it is that voice. It is, we're always rehearsing that stuff. And so one of the best gifts we can give one another is because you have a special thing in that other person's life because they don't see the way that they are felt and sound and stuff like that. So it's kind of neat for them to get a reflection of that. So why don't we do that as Michael's laying out here on the table?
I just want to tickle.
Just speak to Michael about just something about him that just touches you or something.
I think it's interesting that I almost feel like God used you going through that, when you were dealing with your stress, like you were talking about earlier, where it was this constant like mental battle of thoughts and feeling worthless and feeling like, I know one of the biggest things for you was feeling like you had to resolve a thought and you couldn't move past it. And because you could never resolve it because it was an illogical thought that was in your mind, that's why you got caught. It's stuck, right? So I think God's used that experience to now you're kind of applying that same idea to your studies of like, I'm not going to stop till I have an answer kind of a thing. Like I have to get to the bottom of this. And that's been motivating you to dig so deep until you do find that answer and you do find that truth. You do find those things. And I think that's kind of like an interesting, I don't know, something I just thought about a little while ago, but.
Yeah, I never thought of that, really.
I can relate to that because I'm like you. I've heard that people who have dealt with abuse and that kind of thing, they're very skeptical and they want authenticity, they want truth, then they won't give up until they see the truth because there's so much in their lives that is false and hypocritical and that you can't explain, and so I think you and I have that in common. And I see that in you too, and I totally can relate to that. Like I'm, like my journey, and I'll share it when I share me. was that same kind of thing. Like I had to get this for me, from my perspective. I didn't want to, I didn't want to hear it from other people.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know it. So I appreciate that about you. And for me, I think as a member of our family, I'm just so. I always describe you as a teddy bear, and I realize, like, looking at you, probably people don't see that necessarily, but I know you enough to know that you have a huge heart. And for me, as my son, like, that's the love that I feel from you is, and that I see you give your wife and your children and your friends and your dad and your dad-in-law, like, I think that.
And even his mother-in-law.
Yes. I just appreciate that about you. And I just feel like it's just like you have been humbled through your experiences. And I think that in a sense of knowing how, like, experiencing pouring out love to others, I think that, and I feel it and I see it, that you do that with others. So.
Oh, thank you. Keep going. Let's hear it from the audio video engineer. No, yeah.
But and I really appreciate your digging into the word, and I think that has been really fun. Like, even if it's a wacky idea, it doesn't matter. Like, it's good because it's challenging and it's good for everybody to ask questions, like we've been talking about. Ask questions, seek it, knock, dig in. It gets us in the Word, and it's pretty cool.
I don't care if it goes against my core principles. If
it'll either stand or it won't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
So, and that's what I'm trying to do. And like I was saying, there's all sorts of stuff in the Bible. I'm like, this sound insane. They don't sound like this. Something I've never seen, like lightning stuff and casting out demons and stuff. You hear about all this stuff at Hollywood. Oh my gosh, do they just constantly tell that story? Demons, good, evil, the supernatural, all of it, everything, superpowers, all of it is supernatural, almost all of it. And it's like, there is just that bottom line truth where every time I catch myself reading something like, really, could that have happened? I'm like, all I do is I subscribe to, like, quantum mechanics news, and I'm like, you know what? I don't even need to question. I mean, the sun could turn into a ball of cheese tomorrow, and if I looked up and saw it, I'd be like, okay. Well, that's just how it is. Because seriously, nothing makes sense when you look at some of the stuff.
Oh, I know.
None of it makes sense.
Messed up
at all. And I'm just like, okay, I'm willing.
So
to
it gives you a
it.
license to say, why do we have to try to make sense out of every little thing and stick it in a little perfect box and stuff like that? Don't. That's not where life lives.
And people have tried doing that, right?
Oh, they
Einstein didn't like it when people were asking. He's like, "That's spooky stuff."
Right.
That's supernatural, spiritual. I don't like it. And then boom, now where he's he'd probably be like, "Well, good for you for finding that."
Yeah. He loved that kind of stuff. People didn't want to talk about that kind of stuff. People still don't want to talk about that stuff. So, not just scientifically, but in the church, they don't want to. Remember the other day we were talking about that. Like, people will certain churches like squelch the spirit because they don't want it to get too out of hand and stuff. And I'm like, let it get out of hand a little bit if it does. Like, I'd rather err on the side of that in life and the spirit and relationships and stuff. Like, I think this whole thing of just, we got to keep everything under wraps and there's only so much emotional out and all that stuff is just eating away at us.
I think it's a fear, and I guess that's something else that I appreciate about you, is that you have helped bring me out of that, like, box.
Yeah.
Of, like, being so afraid. I was the one that wanted to always, stay as far away from that, that fine line between, like, oh, you're doing what's right and that other side is bad. But there's some line in there, and I would stay far away from it as I could, And you've kind of taught me to, like, push the limits on, like, I don't know, just everything in life, I guess, just thoughts, and just to really explore life to its fullest and not be afraid to ask questions, not be afraid to see what is really the truth, like, what is really good, what is really bad, what is really, who is God really, what is your relationship with him really like, and just all the things that we've been talking about tonight. It's just like, that's really opened up my thinking, and it's been a scary journey because it's stretched me beyond my comfort zone like crazy.
Me too.
And every time you bring up some new crazy study that is like, wait, what? I may be a little bit like fearful at first to go down that path, but then I go down that adventure with you and I study it with you, and it's like I come out being like, wow, that was like really cool. I learned some stuff along the way, and it's like it stretched my thinking, and it's even if it ended up that we decide nope, that was not true, like it was
You
a
learned a
good
million
journey, and we
things.
learned
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much. I studied so much scripture with you, and we had so many deep conversations, and I think it's just like it's been really good for both of us, I think. You know?
That's
there's-
awesome.
I feel like there's no other. It sounds funny. There's no other topic in the world that I could talk about like this and study, like even scientifically, without even the Bible, and archaeologically, or
Yeah.
even just spiritually feel, or pray and have something weird happen, or just sit down and talk with people about it in congregations of 2 people or 5 million. There's no other topic. I can't think of a single one. I play video games. I work at a video game company. I couldn't talk about video games for 5 hours straight. I'd get so exhausted. Not just because I work there, but I can't. I can't tell
Yeah.
you deep in
good
code
point.
how it works. I can't tell, like I don't care about it. I just enjoy
Yeah.
the fun that it gives me. But this is something where I can read the same verse and I'm just like, I don't get it.
Yeah,
I'll move
never
on. I don't really care. And then I'm like, okay, hold on. Now that verse makes sense. Now that makes sense. Oh wait, hold on. That also means that Isaiah and Peter and John and Thomas, it all makes sense. And that's what's cool about it. There's like these weird hyperlinks that are connecting. And once you start to unlock them, you're like, am I crazy or is that real? And then you start reading stuff and Googling stuff. And then people are like, oh, I've been thinking that for 30 years. I have a whole seminar on it. And I watch it. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy. Just one topic. Seriously. Like, it could be just one day in history. There could be a whole PhD study class about, you know what I mean? Like a whole study guide just off like a single day in history of God's death. Like just that day. And you can just talk about it forever. And it's insane. There's nothing else in the world I think I could do this with. I'm curious, is there something you guys can think of? Is there anything that you guys can think of that's this deep?
No, and for me, like part of the reason that I like about it, I don't want to get into my testimony, but was kind of what you're saying is that it's true that when you trying to seek in and understand God and Jesus and how did it all come together and all that stuff. One of the things that's cool for me and for Laurel is we both are what we would call Renaissance people. Like we like a lot of things, from music to art to science to history to all these different things. You know, we're real geeks about that, math, you know, all these kinds of things. And the cool thing about studying the Bible is you get to do all of that. You can, if you can get into archaeology, you can get into history, you can get into science, you can get into sociology, you can get all this is covered in the Bible.
Math and poems and music and
Right.
love
So
stories.
It's kind of fun
and-
because you get this sort of license to go. I can actually be an enthusiast of all these things and never reach the limits just in the Bible, like you're saying. It's not just like going out, okay, because I'm into music and I'm a Christian, I'm going to go study music. I can study music in the Bible and never end. That's what's
it's
wild
insane.
about it.
I've been
So,
liking
yeah.
the star stuff a
Yeah.
lot. Just like the minute someone writes something to me and I can have proof that it was like written not only a few days, but 2,000 years prior to us actually scientifically being able to prove it.
Right.
Like as clear as it does to me is like, okay,
Yeah.
like there's nothing like that. There's not like where they just say some statement like,
It's like very
Hey, look,
specific
some
stuff.
random thing. There's
you
all
know,
these stars up there.
Pluto is, 1 degree off from Saturn based off these alignments and blah, blah, blah. Like, if it made that statement,
Yeah.
it'll be true. And that's what's blowing me away is I've never found one that I'm like, well, that's not scientifically true. I found that with other religions. I won't go into that, but I did. I found very
Yeah.
easy holes I could poke where they made claims, statements, facts that were
Yeah.
like, well, we knew that like 300 years ago. But this one has kind of blown me away. The ones with the stars, because I mean, that's so modern tech. And it's so
Yeah, we didn't
precise
have
in the Bible. It
telescopes,
even
we
says
didn't
what's
have-
in like its
Right.
gravitational clusters. We didn't know what the Pleiades was
Yeah, he's talking
2,000
about
years,
the-
3,000 years ago.
Job 38-40 if you want to look it up.
I love it. Oh, I could just study that all day. I go outside and I just look at it because I'm like, how did they?
Good
How
stuff.
could you have done that without God? There's no way.
Religious, Christian religion itself, outside of the Bible, has claimed all sorts of stupid things that weren't, and that's why we still have this reputation as being dummies and not into science and stuff like that, is because there were times that the church just said obnoxious things, like the earth is flat and stuff like that, but the Bible never said that. So, in fact, the Bible says it's round.
And it hangs in nothing.
Yeah.
Even though it was, people thought that it actually was carried out with it.
Atlas.
on the Atlas
Yeah.
back, on the back of a turtle.
Yeah.
I was like, no, it's just a ball floating in nothingness, which for some reason people in Jerusalem just knew. they always went against the science of the day. But, well, thousands of years later, it is true. Huh?
I like when the scripture says, "Who can loose the belt of Orion?"
Yeah.
And it's like you look at it, and actually those stars that make up the belt of Orion aren't they like moving apart
Yeah.
from each other?
Yeah.
It's like
Loosening the
being
belt.
loosed.
It must be
How would they
Thanksgiving
have
Day
known
for
that?
Orion.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. I joke
There's no way.
around.
That's
So
God
crazy.
just having fun.
I joke around with Kayla all the time, and I'll be like, "Oh, Ryan's loosening his belt." Ugh. And then like the Pleiades too. Like there's not many star clusters that we know about that are actual clusters. There's like a handful of them, and
They just look that
Pleiades
way.
happen to be.
It happens to be one. Right?
It happens to be one.
Right.
And they're all together.
Right, and
And
it takes chromography and you
Yeah.
know like modern telescopes to see those shifts to understand that at this level. Like there's no
Yeah.
way thousands of years ago you could look at the sky and make that determination. You just don't have the ability.
You can't even.
So
see
God was
each one
just
very
showing
clearly.
off and
Yeah.
trying to do that because we do. Even if you made the claim, oh look, we didn't have the Book of Job until 200 AD or something like that.
It's still
We're still
Yeah, we're
a
about
long ways
1900,
away
1800
from a
off,
telescope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are the things to me where I'm like, whenever I had like a teetering in the past of like, well, I'm not always feeling that spiritual part that I want to feel.
Yeah.
I always want more of that. Gosh, I couldn't imagine any of us want anything more than to just constantly just feel that overwhelming, like, ugh. But it's
Yeah.
not always like that. We live life. Things are
Right.
tough. Sometimes you just are like, okay, God, I know you're there, but I'm going through this, and I'd like some help. And sometimes things don't get answered the way I want. Sometimes they're answered the exact opposite way. But at the end, Sarah's case in point, when my first wife died, that's not what I wanted. I was mad at God. I remember screaming. I was yelling at him, like punching my steering wheel. I was so mad when I thought she was going to die, and she did. And now I have my wife. I have you guys. I wouldn't be studying the Bible like this. I probably wouldn't be nearly as close to God because I knew where I was going then. I wasn't going down this path. That's not where I was at in life. And maybe, things would have gone here at some point, but I'm happy with how things are despite the rough parts that came with it because I trust God. And I know that in the end it's all going to work out and whatever's,
And we all get to party with Sarah
yeah.
at some point.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for laying it out open on the table here, and just this was really neat. I hope people listen to this and get to know Michael Labard a little bit more. So,
Awesome.
God bless you all. Come back next time and find out what's all.